Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to use this Google form to help you to identify which of the strategies you're going to use when you're factoring the polynomials that are in your review home assignment today. And the very first thing you're going to do is just open up the form, and it'll look just like this, the title page where it says, which strategy do you use to factor? You're going to click next, and it's going to automatically ask you question number 1 that you always ask yourself when you're factoring. Do you have a GCF? And you'll notice that you have some choices. Yes, I know what a GCF is, and I factored it out. What is a GCF? I know for sure there is no GCF. So let's say we've been out of school for a month, right? So maybe I don't remember what a GCF is to even know how to look for it. So I'm going to take that selection and click next. And then there's a nice little video for me that reminds me how to find the greatest common factor of a polynomial. So hopefully after I've watched that video, when I go back to choose, it says, now do you remember what a GCF is? I've got two options. I can click either yes or no. I'll show you in a minute what happens when you click the no option. But for now, I'm going to click yes. And because now I know what a GCF is, so now I can go back to that question again. Now that I've watched the video, I know that the answer to the question is yes. I know that there's a greatest common factor, and I am going to factor it out. So remember that a GCF is what is something that can be factored out of all three. In this case, we've got three terms. What is something that you can factor out of all three of them? So 15, 5, and 50 can all have a 5 factored out of them. And because they're all negatives, I'm going to go ahead and factor out a -5 out of all of them. And I also can factor out an n. Even though I have more than one n in these two terms, remember you can only factor out what they have in common. So because this one only has one n, that means that we can only factor out one n. So we're going to factor a -5, and we're going to factor an n out of each of those terms. So hence my the selection that I made, yes, I know what the GCF is, and I factored it out. So I'm going to factor it out. So that's going to be -5n will go on the outside. And now let's see what the, for lack of a better term, leftover polynomial is going to be. So I did -15 divided by -5, which means that that is going to be a +3. I had 4 n's. I factored out 1 n, so that means I have 3 n's remaining. I have a -5 divided by a -5, which is going to give me a +1. And I had 2 n's. I factored out one of them, so that means I'll have 1 n remaining. And remember, we like things as short as we possibly can in math, so I'm going to ditch that 1 because we don't really need it. And then -50 divided by, sorry guys. So then I've got -50 divided by -5, which is going to give me a +10. And I only had 1 n in the polynomial to start, and I factored out 1 n, so that means I have no n's remaining. So here is my leftover after I have taken that GCF and factored it out. So now I'm going to click next, and it asks me question number 2, is it special? So remember, if you don't remember what special means, you can click on that little button right there. What does special mean? You can go to next. There's a nice little review video for you so you remember what it means. And hopefully after you've watched the video, you can say yes. So it says, do you remember what special means? So one choice could be yes, I remember what special means, and what I have is not special. Option number 2 could be no, I still don't know what special means, and I need some help. Option number 3 is yes, I remember what special means, and what I have is special. Well, because I've watched the video, I know that what I have here is not special, because for it to be special, you would have to have perfect squares on either side of here, and we don't. So I'm going to click yes, I remember what special means. Okay, you kind of have to read the directions a little bit here. So, because the question says, do you remember what special means? I'm going to say, yes, I remember what special means, and what I have here is not special. Then I'm going to click next. Next question I need to ask myself is it a quadratic trinomial? So I can either click yes, nor, no, or what does quadratic mean? If I don't remember what that means, I can select that, click on next. Look, there's a little video to help me remember. And then after I get done watching the video, once again, I've got 3 options. So I could say option number 1, do I remember so it's asking me, do I remember what a quadratic trinomial is? Now, if I say no and I need help, let me show you what that looks like once you, so let's say, I still don't remember what quadratic means. You click on that, it takes you to a Google form that helps you to ask me for some extra help. Okay, but I'm not going to click that because I watched the video and I know what quadratic trinomial means. And so I'm going to click yes, I remember what it means. But I'm not going to click this one because this one says yes, and I have a quadratic trinomial. This is not a quadratic trinomial because, yes, it is a trinomial because I do have 3 terms. But remember, for it to be quadratic, that lead term has to have a degree of 2. So I'm going to click the option, yes, I remember what a quadratic trinomial is, and I do not have a quadratic trinomial. So I'm going to click next. Question number 4. Do I have 4 or more terms that can be grouped? So I only have 1, 2, 3 terms. So that would be a negative because I don't even have 4 terms to start. So that's going to be a no. I'm going to click next. And I'm all done because I was able to answer no to all the rest of those questions. So I actually already have it in fully factored form, which is negative 5n, and then 3n to the third plus n plus 10. So that is in fully factored form. My next example will be 6r to the second plus 39r plus 63. So once I'm all done, I can click next. There is a link to sign up for extra help if you need it at the end. If you don't need to sign up for that, simply click submit. And it takes you back to the beginning so that you can submit another response, which means you can start over again using this form. And once again, it will take you back to the beginning, so you need to just click next. And it's going to ask you that first question again, is there a GCF? I'm going to assume we've watched the video and now we know how to find the GCF. I'm going to click yes, I know what the GCF is, and I'm going to factor it out. Because if I'm looking at all 3 of these terms, I can see that they can be factored by 3. So I'm going to take that 3 and I'm going to factor it out of that trinomial. So 6 divided by 3 means that I would have a 2. The r squared still remains. 39 divided by 3 means I'll have plus 13r. And then 63 divided by 3 will leave me plus 21. So I used the option, yes, there is a GCF, and I know how to factor it out. I'm going to go to next. It says, is the leftover special? Remember, special means that these have to be perfect squares. Neither of those is a perfect square. So, no, it is not special. I'm going to move on to the next. Is this a quadratic trinomial? Well, I've got 3 terms, don't I? 1, 2, and 3. So we got the trinomial part right. And my lead term does have a degree of 2. So now I know that it's also quadratic. So I'm going to click yes. I'm going to click next. Does the quadratic trinomial have an a equal to 1? If I don't remember what that means, what does a mean? I can click that button and it'll take me to a video, but I remember what a means. I remember that a is that number right in front of the exponent of 2, that coefficient right there. So obviously A is not equal to 1 because A is equal to 2. So I'm going to click no, A is not equal to 1. I'm going to click next. It says A is not equal to 1, so now what? I'm going to click one of two options. Either I know how to factor it or I don't know how to factor it. If you don't know how to factor it, as you probably know, there's actually a couple of different videos for you this time because that one has a tendency to be the hardest. Now, do you remember how to factor a quadratic? I'm going to assume we've watched the video. Click yes. And we are going to go, back. Okay, so now we're going to change this answer to I know how to factor it because I do. And so once I get that factored, it tells me that I'm all done. So let's make sure we remember how to factor it, shall we? So remember that you can do guess and check for this part to factor it, or you can use my favorite method, which is the AC method. So we're going to do 2 times 21, because remember we have to multiply A times C. So A times C in this case was 42. So we need to figure out what can we multiply to get 42 that we can add to get B, which in this case is 13. So I need to figure out what are those things that I can multiply to get 42. And I'm going to try to make sure that I go in order. So I'm going to do 1 and 42. I can do 2 and 21. I can do 3 and 14. 5 won't work. I can do 6 times 7, and lo and behold, there's the one I'm looking for, because 6 plus 7 also equals 13. So remember what you need to do now is you need to take that leftover there, that leftover polynomial, and we're going to use that 6 and that 7 to break that 13R apart into 2 terms, so that now we have a polynomial that now has 4 terms to it. What was the point of taking that trinomial and breaking it up to make it into 4 terms? Well, now we can factor by grouping. If you don't remember how to factor by grouping, there is a section in here. So that's why hopefully if you chose I know how to factor it, then you should know what to do. If you don't know how to factor it, then that's where you need to go to watch those examples. But I know what to do because I know I need to just divide them into groups. So I'm going to factor a 2R out of that group, and I'm going to factor a 7 out of that group. So after I factor that 2R out, that means I'm going to have an R plus 3. And then after I factor that 7 out, I'm going to have an R plus 3. So remember, you know you're on the right track when you have that binomial that ends up being common. You're going to factor out that R plus 3. And remember, the 2R plus 7 go into the other 2. So we don't have anything quadratic anymore. We don't have a GCF. What's the one little teeny tiny thing that I forgot to do is that I still had that GCF way up there from my very, very first step, right? I factored out that 3. So make sure you don't forget that the GCF still needs to come down. Okay, so don't forget your GCF. Hopefully you find this Google form helpful. And please, please, please let me know. It's really stressing me out that we're not going to be able to practice this in person. I know it's not an easy task, so please let me know if you've got any questions.